Thanks, Sandra. Welcome and good evening to everyone here with us in the gallery, counselors, staff, media, members of the public, both here and joining us online. Welcome to the special council meeting of June 19th, 2024, here in beautiful downtown Summerside in historic City Hall. We'll begin our meeting tonight. We have, this is a special council meeting, so we essentially have one topic on, although we have one other additional resolution. So I will begin by calling the meeting to order here at 6:01 p.m. and I'll call for a motion for approval of the agenda from a member of council, but I would, before we go to you and Rick, Harry, I would note that I would like to amend the agenda to add 1E, which is a resolution COS 24-059. Actually, I'll put that at 5C, resolution COS 24-059. And that is a resolution re-disqualification Councillor Ward 5. So with that, I'll call for a motion for the amended agenda. Councillor McDougall, second. Councillor Morrison, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, we'll proceed with the agenda as amended, and I will make a note on my hard copy. We begin each one of our meetings here at the City of Summerside by acknowledging the land upon which we gather is unceded Mi'kmaq territory. Abogway is covered by the historic treaties of peace and friendship. We pay our respects to the indigenous Mi'kmaq people who have occupied this island for over 12,000 years, past, present, and future. At this point, I'd call on any member of council to declare a conflict of interest with respect to any item on the agenda before you this evening. Seeing and hearing none, we will carry on to item 2. As this is a special council meeting and I'm the chair, I'm going to read into the record the information that was in the public document for everybody here today, and give Councillor Duran a bit of a break as well, who often reads all this stuff in, so please bear with me. What I will do is I will read in items 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we will go to a presentation from Sam Murphy and Janice Harper. And after the presentation, then we'll open up for public comments with respect to the presentation, which will add some depth to the topic here tonight. By way of background, quick addition here, in 2021, the City of Summerside commissioned a housing needs assessment. That housing needs assessment identified that we were had a significant shortage of housing in our City of Summerside. It identified that the need for housing in the City of Summerside was going to be approximately 200 units, which was on the high end of the scale, which is what we met, per year for approximately 10 years. At the same time, as everyone knows, we have entered and are still in a housing crisis, not just in Summerside, but across Prince Edward Island and Atlantic Canada and Canada as a whole. And then in 2022-2023, the Mayor and Council's task force was appointed. The task force considered all policies and policy options, program service options that could be undertaken by the City of Summerside. That document was completed in the fall of 2023 in October and presented to Council from the task force. The task force was made up of representatives from across the spectrum in terms of their expertise and experience in housing, those dealing on the front lines with populations who are unhoused, bankers and lenders, policy advocates and planners, contractors and builders, and the list goes on. Essentially, everybody who is involved in the preparation and construction of housing was at the table, and those experts were from across PEI and also from right here in the City of Summerside. The Mayor's task force, Mayor and Council's task force on attainable housing was presented to Council. Council adopted it and passed a resolution, I believe, to begin implementing the recommendations that were set out in the report. For anyone who has read the report, a number of the recommendations in the task force report are contained in the work that is happening today. So before I begin, I wanted to say this didn't all start in December 2023. This has been coming together for quite some time. Then, in December 2023, the City of Summerside signed a contribution agreement for the Housing Accelerator Funding, which we call HAF, and committed to increasing housing supply and streamlining the approval process. To start implementing the HAF-funded initiatives, City Council proposes to amend its official plan and bring into effect a new Summerside Zoning Bylaw, CS-40, This includes a change to the future land use plan to redesignate land adjacent to the east-west connector from residential and agriculture to CDA, which is a comprehensive development area, and a change to the zoning map to rezone the area from R1, R2, R3, R4, R5, and agriculture to CDA to support housing and commercial development. There is a map in the package. In the official plan, policies are added to: first, enable a greater variety and mix of housing through increased density and infill development, utilizing existing infrastructure, including allowing all residential lots to accommodate up to 4 dwelling units. Enable preparation of urban design guidelines and form-based codes to integrate affordable housing and housing for vulnerable populations into neighborhoods. Enable density bonusing for affordable housing. Allow accessory dwelling units in the form of secondary suites and garden suites. Provide for housing for vulnerable populations, and recognize modular building as an acceptable construction form for all buildings. Policies are also incorporated to facilitate the future development of lands adjacent to the east-west connector as a mixed-use commercial residential comprehensive development area. Approval authority for applications in this area is delegated to the development officer. The new zoning bylaw implements these approaches and includes the following provisions: allows secondary suites and garden suites in R1, R2, R3, R3R, R4, and CDA connector corridor zones subject to certain provisions. List semi-detached dwellings, duplexes, row house, townhouse, and apartment buildings as permitted uses as the R1, R2, and R3R zones to allow up to 4 dwelling units per residential lot. R3 and R4 allow for more dwelling units per lot. Allow residential buildings up to 4 stories within 500 meters of Holland College. Allow residential buildings up to 6 stories in the R4 zone and up to 10 stories in the CDA zone. Floor area ratio, also known as FAR, has been deleted, and standards for landscaping and maximum lot coverage added to the R4 zone. Time limits for approvals have been extended to 2 years. The CDA zone contains standards for development adjacent to the east-west connector. 2 districts are created: connector nodes, commercial and mixed development; connector corridor, residential and mixed development. Uses and development standards are established for each district. So I'm going to put my phone on Do Not Disturb. 3, overview, presentation, comments, and questions. 3A, presentation of Housing Accelerator Fund, official plan amendment, and new zoning bylaw and zoning map documents are in the meeting package. Sub 1 is housing acceleration. Sub 2 is official plan amendments, summary table. Sub 3 is zoning bylaw amendments and summary table. And Zone 4 is proposed map changes. The public, of course, will be invited to make comments. So as I said at the beginning, we'll do a comment period at the conclusion of the presentation so people get a better flavor and for the overall package as opposed to hearing it just from me. As well, Council has held 1 open house so far in the community. Council has also scheduled 4 more open houses. Those are on June 25th from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. at the Credit Union Place. June 25th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Credit Union Place. July 3rd from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. again at the Credit Union Place. And July 3rd from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Credit Union Place. Throughout this process, members of the public are able to access and review all of the information that has been posted online. And there is a lot, and so we would encourage anyone to submit comments throughout the process and the period. Council will receive all of those comments and review those comments as part of our process. The next official step in this process would occur on July 9th, which would be the planning board meeting of council, which would be scheduled currently for 6 p.m. Last piece, the explanation of the process. In order to process an official plan and new zoning bylaw, the following steps are required. 1, the new zoning bylaw is read for a first time, declared as read, and approved at a first council meeting. Now, when it says approved, that doesn't mean it is completely approved. It means the first reading has been approved. 2, the new zoning bylaw is referred to Planning Board, which is July 9th at 6 p.m. for review and recommendation. All members of council tend to sit in on Planning Board meetings and have open discussions at that time. Steps 1 and 2 take place at the same meeting of council and will take place this evening. Step 3, Planning Board prepares a recommendation to council. Step 4, the new zoning bylaw is read a second time, declared as read and approved a second time, and adopted at a second council meeting. Step 5, the official plan amendments are read to be adopted by council. The resolution will be either carried or defeated by a vote of council. If the official plan amendments are adopted by council, it is sent to the Minister of Housing, Land and Communities for signature and amendments, and the amendments become official. If the official plan amendment is defeated, the new zoning bylaw will be defeated as well, as the zoning amendments cannot contradict the official plan amendments. Sub 6, the new zoning bylaw is to be adopted by council. The resolution will be either carried or defeated by vote of council. If the new zoning bylaw is adopted by council, it is sent to the Minister of Housing, Land and Communities for signature, and the amendments become official. Steps 4 to 6 take place at council's second meeting. So, if you're as confused as I am when I read that and don't experience it on a regular basis, there are still more meetings to come. There is a planning board meeting, and the way this process works at this stage is this is an opportunity for the information to be put out, to get feedback from members of the public. As I said at the outset, the period for feedback does not end, so you can send in things by writing, you can call, you can speak to your counselor, and come planning board, I can't speak for all of planning board or all of council. There's sometimes also, if planning board or council wishes, that they can have additional public comments. So this council, if I can go a little bit off script here, has been working very hard on this file, but we've also been working very hard on making sure that our public engagement and our goal of listening with intent and actually listening to feedback is taken seriously, and that's what we want. We want people's feedback. We want feedback that maybe will disagree as much as we want feedback that agrees. It is really important for us to have an open dialogue and give people the opportunity to be able to share their thoughts and their comments and their perspectives, which we certainly value. So at this stage, I will hand the floor over to Sam Murphy and Janice Harper for the presentation on the City of Summerside HAF public meeting and council that is up on the screens.
Welcome to our traveling roadshow. So the Housing Accelerator Fund is receiving a lot of press and information. There's a lot of information being circulated across the country because similar initiatives or similar funding has been distributed across the country. So the Made in Summerside approach is what we're going to talk about tonight. Okay. There, okay. So the Housing Accelerator Fund has 4 main goals. They are to create more housing at an accelerated pace. And to support development of complete communities that are walkable with a diverse mix of land uses. And more importantly, to support development of affordable, inclusive, equitable, and diverse communities by providing housing across the spectrum, and to support development of low carbon and climate resilient communities. In December, as Mayor Kutcher noted, the city did sign an agreement with CMHC for HAF funding to pursue 14 initiatives. So this is a big project for Summerside. There, okay, so $5.8 million was awarded to Summerside. And the approach that has been taken is to build on council's commitment to complete neighborhoods and smart growth, to end exclusionary zoning, to allow more units on each residential lot, or to possibly allow more units on each residential lot, to encourage missing middle housing. We'll get into missing middle housing and what that constitutes in a few minutes, to allow higher density residential development, to allocate land for future residential development, and to encourage housing along the new east-west corridor. We have an initial focus, and of the 14 initiatives, you'll see the little bubbles, or the bubbles on the side that with different colors. So we do have an initial focus. So kind of to get the program rolling, the initial focus is to facilitate accessory dwelling units. Of course, to look at how to promote growth on the east-west corridor, to legalize 4 units as of right, to eliminate exclusionary zoning, to densify around Holland College, and we've also completed a land supply study. So basically looked at where could land be developed in Summerside. The purpose of this meeting is to present to council and to members of the public who are here the official plan amendments, which would include to repeal the existing east-west corridor secondary plan. I think that dates back to 2008. And to update the future land use map and apply a new zone, a CDA zone, to the east-west connector corridor. Also, the purpose of this meeting is to develop or present a new bylaw CS 40, which would involve repealing the existing zoning bylaw and to update the zoning map. And again, consistent with the future land use map, the zoning map would be updated and apply a comprehensive development area to the east-west connector. There will be an opportunity for public feedback, as has already been mentioned. Okay. We've done some engagement to date, and as Mayor Kutcher has already stated, the east-west corridor has been in place, or the secondary plan has been in place, but as the corridor is only being developed now, we're at a new stage. As mentioned, the Mayor's Task Force on Attainable Housing brought forward and explored the need for housing and a variety of housing in Summerside in order to meet growth. The Housing Accelerator Fund application was approved in December of 2023, so that brings us here in June of 2024 to our first big step in this journey with HAF, and that is to review current official plan amendments and a new bylaw. We have had an open house in May of 2024. Information was posted to the website. Letters have been distributed to property owners and to properties adjacent to the new proposed comprehensive development area on the east-west corridor. And notice of this meeting was placed in the newspaper, the Guardian newspaper, on June 7th and again on June 14th. Turn it over to Sam.
So in terms of the official plan amendments, this is a series of policy changes to support the changes that would happen in the bylaw. The focus in terms of housing supply and variety looks at where different uses are permitted and the density of those uses, so where the different types of residential development can take place, as well as looking in specific areas at how to increase building height and expanding uses to, again, provide that greater variety and supply. The other area of change to the official plan, and each policy is laid out in that amendment table so you can see what it says today and what it's proposed to say. Also includes some policies that would repeal the 2008 secondary plan and integrate the ideas behind that into the official plan itself, creating that new designation and the approach to regulating land uses. So in terms of increasing housing choice, the official plan policies look at recognizing the need for missing middle housing options, recognizing that there are housing needs for vulnerable populations and those need to be specifically considered, and to provide for garden suites and secondary suites to allow those sort of small integrations of units where appropriate. The other elements that were integrated included sustainably increasing housing supply, so thinking about using land that we've already got rather than expanding out beyond the serviced area. And so one of those factors was allowing 4-story residential buildings within 500 meters of Holland College. And for most of that area, those buildings would already be permitted at that height or even greater. So there's a small area where you see, I think it's a 1-story potential increase. And then the other element in terms of that sustainability component is allowing slightly taller buildings in the R4 zone. And when we look at the mixed residential and commercial buildings in the proposed CDA for that connector area. So that's all greenfield new development along the connector. Yeah, I think that's, yeah. So the reason we've proposed to bring this in 2 different ways. So for the official plan, we're looking at a series of policy amendments so that you can see the main body still works. With the bylaw itself, the changes are integrated through pretty much every section of the bylaw. So it's more straightforward just to bring in a new bylaw, but we've highlighted what is different from the existing one. So this would involve repealing the 2018 bylaw, and the changes focus on increasing the options for accessory dwelling units, the housing supply and variety options, the CDA for the east-west connector, densification around Holland College, and a range of very minor technical changes, changing terminology. We talked about that 2-year time frame for approvals, that sort of thing. And then the only change to the zoning map that's being proposed is that east-west connector, integrating a CDA there. So for accessory dwelling units, these are often known as garden suites or in-law suites. The garden suites are the ones that are detached from the house. The secondary suites are integrated inside the dwelling. Under the proposed changes, both would be permitted on the same lot. Parking would not be required, but where it is being provided, the developer, the property owner, would be required to put the parking in subject to the same sort of standards that are in the parking section of the bylaw. So talking about setbacks and how it's placed. And there is a requirement for compatibility with the main unit. So trying to ensure that these get integrated into neighborhoods in a way that matches the neighborhoods. So there are development standards, there's minimum and maximum sizes for these. So for garden suites, the detached ones, they would be permitted for lots with single detached dwellings, semi-detached, and row house dwellings. Where there's an existing accessory building, so whether that's a garage or another sort of storage building, that could be converted to an accessory to the garden suite where it can meet. So all of these would be subject to National Building Code, any other requirements that are in place. So it's not a sort of a guaranteed blanket approval. But you would be able to coordinate that with an accessory building. And it can include, you don't necessarily have to convert the entire building to that garden suite. So you could still have your garage and then a suite above, for example. There are new development standards and size limits so that it's still secondary to the main dwelling, and it would not be permitted to be used as a tourism establishment. So a short-term rental would not be permitted for this. It's intended to provide long-term housing. For secondary suites, and it's a little bit off the screen, I think, but the presentation is available online if anyone wants to see the full text. So these are ones that are either added to but attached to the main dwelling or built directly within. So it's often a basement apartment. If you have an attached garage, a suite above, anything that's considered part of the main dwelling. And those would be permitted on single detached dwelling lots, semi-detached dwellings lots, and row house dwelling. Again, they could not be used in conjunction with a site that has a tourism establishment, so short-term rentals, again, thinking about that long-term housing supply. There would only be one permitted within the suite and within the dwelling, and there are size limits, so it has to be no more than a certain size in relation to the main dwelling and an overall limit. So this is still secondary. It's not two equal-sized units. It's still secondary to the main unit. And under the bylaw, the main unit or secondary suite would have to be owner-occupied, the way it's drafted currently. Okay. Do you want me to? Okay, I'll keep going. So in terms of changes to the permitted uses within the zones, and I will say we've been working with staff all the way through this, so this is something that we've had a lot of back and forth on the best way to approach it. So in all the zones, the residential zones, up to 4 dwelling units would be permitted on each lot where the lot can accommodate it. So again, you have to be able to meet setbacks, you have to be able to meet code, all of those other conditions that would be required for a permit. And there are development standards, so where a new type of use is added to that zone, we've added development standards for those uses. So with that, you will see in the 3 zones listed above, you would now have row houses up to 4 units per building, apartment building up to 4 units, and townhouses up to 4 units that would not have been there before. And then in the R3 zone, which has a little bit more already permitted, where the density of units would be up to 8 units per building, which is already permitted as discretionary uses in some cases. And then the apartment buildings up to 4 units would be retained. And again, development standards have been updated. And you'll see in all of those tables, you'll also see the secondary suite and the garden suite, and they're always subject to the bylaw requirements for those units. For the R4 zone, single detached dwellings would only be permitted as infill or where lot characteristics prevent other uses. So every now and then you'll see a lot that just doesn't quite accommodate a larger structure. But the idea with this zone is to try to find a way to really emphasize meeting that housing need. Floor area ratio, as we mentioned for the official plan policies, would be deleted. with a maximum lot coverage of 35%, and then landscaping requirements. So making sure that there's a certain amount of landscaping and that there's buffering between different uses would be included. And then a maximum of 6 stories unless higher is approved by council, and I believe that's consistent with what you already have. So then with the east-west connector, in the official plan, I've covered it a little bit already, but we've looked at approaching this as a comprehensive development area. So rather than creating a whole new zone for the connector, we are creating a specific area within the CDA. So everything along that corridor will be designated as CDA, and then within the bylaw itself, you'll see 2 different districts in the same way that you have with your downtown zones. The emphasis in both of these areas is a mix of uses, but you'll see when we get into the next slide that we've separated out the nodes, so where there'd be an intersection, and then the main corridor areas. And again, with that, keeping on the theme of trying to ensure that rapid creation of housing and being able to move quickly, decision-making would be delegated to staff. So this will be considered to already have been a development concept, and so as applications come forward in the CDA, it would go directly to staff, but it would have to meet the bylaw requirements. So as you can see in this map, we've got 2 different districts. The nodes are where there'd be major intersections. So there's 2 of those, and then the 2 stretches. You'll see the numbers there 3 times, but there's really essentially 2 long stretches. With the connector nodes, the priority there is on commercial uses and mixed commercial residential, but not residential on its own. And then the reverse would be true for the corridor. So the emphasis there would be higher density residential. But if there are mixed commercial residential or other uses, they'd also be permitted. So again, priority is on residential, but keeping with the city's official plan policies that are already in place about complete communities and mixed uses, there would be some other options. But then on the maps, the future land use map and the zoning map, you wouldn't see the 2 districts, you'd see the 1 CDA zone. So I've already gone through those 2 different districts, but essentially setting those out there, the standards are slightly different within each. There are setbacks for buildings over a certain size that are adjacent to lower density residential zones. So still thinking about how they might affect the areas that are already around them. But still thinking about things like site planning, landscaping, screening, and the location of parking. That being said, and this is a fairly common theme with Housing Accelerator Fund applications or initiatives across the country, is in this case there would be no minimum parking requirements. And what we are seeing, and this is national, is that developers tend to put in what they know the market will require and expect anyway of parking. So we don't expect to see sites that are developed without parking, but we'll leave that to what the need is. And over time, as the community becomes more walkable and transit becomes more viable, the need for parking will ideally reduce over time as well. The other component, and these were identified through the agreement with CMHC, in addition to those 4 lots and 4 units per lot, and the exclusionary zoning, that removing any single-use zoning, was a requirement to support density adjacent to the secondary university, so to Holland College. So 4-story buildings within 500 meters, you can see that buffer in the map. And so some zones, so it's a minimum of 4 stories permitted, not required. But if the zone allows higher, those properties could be developed at a higher height, and a lot of that area would already be permitted to be above 4 stories. So other minor or less significant changes, I suppose, modular buildings have been accepted for all building forms, and I don't think the city had deliberately tried to ban certain types of modular housing, but it was just to make sure the language was inclusive of modular for all types, so not just for single detached. Refinements in some of the definitions, so for ancillary residences, that increase to the time limits for approvals, trying to make sure that the process is as streamlined as possible so they don't have to come back for approval if something happens. And then again, updated language for new concepts and language, so moving away from single family dwelling, for example, because it's not always a family household, it's other types. So just changes throughout to reflect that. And all of those changes are highlighted in the amendment tables that would be in your package, and I believe are available online for the public to review. So again, summarizing all of that, the official plan is a series of policy amendments that also integrates the repeal of the east-west corridor secondary plan, and then that one change to the future land use map, And the zoning bylaw is a new bylaw repealing the existing, but essentially largely keeping what you have, but with these targeted or surgical sort of changes. And then with the map, the only change there is that CDA for the east-west connector corridor. So the next steps in this process, and the mayor had alluded to them at the beginning, is that we've had a series of engagement, whether it's the letter, the open house, or the public notice to date, but there'll be this meeting with comments from the public. Planning board will then give a recommendation to council, and at the second meeting of council, the final decisions about whether or not to proceed with these would be taken and then submitted to the province. As mentioned, there will be follow-up engagement at the credit union place. Documents are online for anyone who wants to review them on their own time. And then there will be future phases of the Housing Accelerator Fund initiatives as we continue on. It's a multi-year project and multi-year funding. So with that, I guess we'll open the floor to questions from council or the public, or we're in your hands.
Yeah, thank you, Sam and Janice. Now I'll open the floor to members of council with initial questions, and then we'll open the floor to members of the public. Councilor Duran?
I have a couple of written things that came in that I'll read when it comes time for public questions.
Any specific questions from council? Councilor McDougall?
Maybe I'll listen to the public first, and I'll chime in a little later. I have a couple of concerns that I discussed a little earlier with the committee, so I'll defer that until we hear from the public. So thank you.
Yeah, actually, just one comment. If you could go back to it's just a couple slides back where it showed the east-west corridor and the different CDA zones, and I think nodes is what we referred to. Yeah. The one that just showed, yeah, that one. And maybe I realized it before, or maybe this is new, but I really like how sort of at the Water Street and then sort of central, that there is that sort of commercial focus, which I think kind of goes to how when we were really want to create neighborhoods, I think that really sort of separates two sort of key areas of that east-west corridor. And it was really, like I said, I think maybe that came up before, but seeing it on the map really kind of made me think that it's a really interesting concept, and I like that, how it separates neighborhoods, really. So, yeah, just a comment.
Yeah, it is a similar idea to your downtown zones where you have the different districts and different permitted uses within sort of how they work together, but still somewhat different. Yep.
Thanks, Sam. And council, I have some, Councilor McColman.
No, I just want to piggyback on Councillor Justin, your comment. In the nodes, could you go back to the one, I think it might be just before this one, the two red zone 02 connector? There, right there. I'm just and I hope I can say this clear enough. I'm just wondering, the connector corridor 02, as Councillor Justin has just pointed out, that's more in a commercial area, but I want to zero in on, you had mentioned that in some of those areas, there could be 10 stories, but there would have to be setbacks after the 4th floor. So could you kind of explain that a little bit more, and is that going to be in residential or in that zone where it would be more commercial?
Thank you. That is along the corridor, so the stretches that are more residential. Do you want to go back to the other map, if you don't mind? And this is a similar idea to what you have in your downtown, your commercial downtown districts, where if there's a building over a certain height adjacent to lower density residential, that over 4 stories, the setbacks of the wall of the outer wall of the building that is adjacent would have to be set back from the front of the building so that it doesn't have that feeling of sort of towering over the adjacent uses. So it's a way to sort of minimize, and it's a pretty standard way with taller buildings to minimize the impact. And so it would be adjacent to R1, 2, and R3R, I believe. Those sort of lower density zones is where that would apply. When you look at that, you'll see most of the, and this is the whole idea behind the corridor, is that it is largely undeveloped adjacent to it already. So for the most part, you know, the impact will be minimal. It's more with the areas where they butt up against existing neighborhoods, and that's what this is designed to offset.
So when you say that would butt up against existing neighborhoods, are you talking about R1 neighborhoods?
I think it's almost entirely R1. There might be some R3 and R4 just to the southwest, but yeah, it's mostly R1, I believe.
Okay, thank you for explaining.
I know Aaron and Linda are here from Tech Services, but that setback, I believe, is, once you get to that 4th floor, the next one, it has to be like a 45-degree angle from the roof of the 4th floor to the roof of the 5th floor, if that makes sense.
There's even a diagram in the bylaw in the commercial zone that shows it if you want to be able to picture it.
Okay, thank you.
I just had, I don't know how much I don't know what's appropriate to ask whenever it's somebody, like somebody's wondering about their property, because it's looking like their property is within this. So if their property is rezoned, how does that affect affecting their tax rates?
Tax rates are typically dependent on the actual use, not the zoning. So
Okay.
until someone changes the use, there should be no impact because the assessment's based on existing use.
Okay, so if they have a tax rate based on the use now, their use isn't going to change, but their zoning will be changing, but their tax rate will be staying the same because it's
Exactly.
still the same use.
Yep.
Okay.
And with any change in zoning, there's no requirement to change to the new zone. You're allowed to continue with the existing uses anyway. It's more that when you do want to make changes, it would have to be
Okay,
aligned with
I
the
got
new
you,
zone.
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just have one quick question there for you, Sam and Janice, while we're on this one. And I'll come back to, like I said, my overall comments at the end, which I'm like, first of all, I'm just gonna highlight them real quick, that I'm really happy that we're here, that all the work that's been put into it by staff, by their team, by council now for almost going on 2 years, and to really be bold and aggressive, and to take really forward-thinking steps. I spent last night reading back over the Federal Housing Task Force, the Federal Housing Plan, the Provincial Housing Plan, our task force, and we're definitely, at least from the world of what the experts and the data and the feedback is in order to how to tackle this housing crisis, where we are today is right at the very front. So I think we should be really proud as a community, but we'll see how we go. I have a question though on the CDA zone, and it's almost a micro question, but it's with respect to the zone 2, sort of in the middle on the north side of what will be the roadway there. Generally, we follow principles of step-back zoning or step-up zoning. And do you think that's too abrupt a change to go from a single-unit dwelling to, even if there is a setback, to a 10-story? Or would you want to put some buffer around that little sliver on the north side of the middle section?
It was definitely a question we gave a fair amount of thought to when we were trying to think about the best way to approach this. So it is, the intent with those step backs is to try to minimize the visual impact, and then with setbacks for parking and everything else. There are different ways to do it, but at the end of the day, we were looking also at the amount of investment the city and in turn the public is putting into the corridor and really wanting to maximize this opportunity to find ways to provide housing. You could approach it differently if you'd like. There's no single answer to that. So I guess at the end of the day, that's a policy decision for council, but this in the end is how we felt it would be the most effective way of, again, thinking about that housing need.
I don't see any other questions from council. I did miss as well. Councillor Snow did call me this afternoon, and he really wanted to be here. He's had a family emergency that he has had to deal with, and so he sends along his regrets. I know he's put a lot of work into this over the past couple of years, so I wanted to make note of it. He didn't just decide not to show up. At this point, if council is comfortable, we'll go to statements, comments, questions from members of the public. A quick note, we may not have all the answers. That's kind of how this works sometimes. You ask questions, and so when you do stand up, we need to give your name, your address, and then provide your statement or question. If we can answer them now, that's great. Again, this helps to inform council about perspectives and helps staff as well look at ways that maybe there are tweaks or adjustments. So at that point, I'll open it up for the floor, so whoever wants to come up can come up first, and I'll open it up. Come on up. I'm gonna get you stopped for one quick second, just I want to make sure your mic's on. We have Sandra filling, Brian is normally our guy. Sandra's finding it. Can you turn it on, Sandra?
Yep.
Oh, there we go. You want to be on the record and just name and
Yep.
address?
No,
although I
I'm
know
Nick
both.
McLean, live at 245 Mountain. Nick McLean. So I guess my question, and I think this is with Dan, what I'm talking about, is on the map 1 or CDA designation and zone. I think it's 72983. So that would be right behind a couple of our properties. And Jerry, as I know we've talked about it before, that's not going to be single dwelling. It looks like the residential stops, like for the zone 2, right before that. And it turns into zone 1 there on the back of those properties. So, I would say go left, please. Left, up, and right up there. So all those backing there. I'm looking at that. Is that going to be residential, or is that going to be commercial and up to 10 stories on the back of my property?
So yes, that is the connector corridor, so that's primarily residential, but it is the area that would have the 10 stories with the step back above 4 stories.
Okay, yeah, that's my understanding. I guess I'll just speak selfishly and say I would be opposed to that. I was hoping when we bought our house a few years ago, it was the last house on the last cul-de-sac, and then the road went, they expanded it further, which is great. We got some new neighbors that are nice. I really don't want a 10-unit building overlooking my pool in the backyard, and I really think everybody would agree it's not something they'd optimally like to see for their backyard. So that's basically my concern, is I would like to see some kind of dwelling, or where he said number 2 is going to be mostly residential, that quarter. I'd like to see that continue on to residential till it meets that corner. And that way, anybody who was there before and has properties in single dwelling homes, at least is going to have residential around them and not have big commercial buildings right there.
Can I have the mouse?
Yeah, in zone R1 or R2.
Just want to make sure so is it really just this bit in here?
Correct. And I know I've talked to Scott Drummond, I've talked to Jerry, our neighbor, and they have the same concerns. I know one of them couldn't be here tonight, so I like to see that extended, like the thought process of having residential in that zone 2 continuing behind that north end. And I'm not sure, Dan, if that was what you're alluding to when you're asking your question. I'd like to see that be more residential and row units, duplexes, single-family dwelling, but not 10-story buildings optimally in that area. We've been there, some of those houses have been there for, I think, 19 years now, since the subdivision started, and it's gonna be a little bit of a change if Jerry wakes up and there's a 10-story building in his backyard. That's basically my only comments regarding it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, those are taken. That was to my question as well, to
Yeah,
a certain
that's
degree.
what I thought.
And the only reason is I was asking as well, those throughout the corridor there, that's really the only area where you have existing residential abutting, and one planning principle, which sometimes can be adopted, is that step up or step down. So where you would have, we were talking about no longer having just a single dwelling, but before you get into a higher density zoning area. So yeah.
All right, thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That was helpful comments.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Jody Sentner. I'm the manager of Lifehouse Emergency Shelter and Transitional Homes here in Summerside. I'll not give the address for obvious reasons. So I'm not really familiar with all this zoning and kind of what's going on in that. My concern, not my concern, my question is, out of all these new builds that are going up and whatnot, how much of that is going to be affordable housing or even low-income housing? Because that is a huge, if you're with me tonight, are 3 of my past residents that we did successfully house. I couldn't take everybody because there weren't enough chairs here to fill. But it was hard to find something that they could afford. At times we were matching people up and trying to house them that way so that they wouldn't have to remain in a shelter. So yeah, that's my question is what's the affordable and low income look like?
Thank you, and that's definitely a key component of the HAF funding, trying to think about all sectors of the population and their needs. I would say that with these, so the official plan policy changes start to insert ideas and reinforce. Yeah, I know, I'm gonna, if I look at you, I won't be on the mic. Trying to reinforce that need to accommodate the whole spectrum. So some of the policy changes are to help future work. I'd say most of the affordable housing work will come in the next phases of the initiatives that the city has committed to. The most direct support for the affordability component now is just the supply and making sure that there are more units available so that opens up some of the space, especially with existing units. So these aren't directly focused, but there are definitely some initiatives in the future phases of the HAF initiative that will be more focused on the affordability component.
Any further comments, questions, statements from members of the public? Yeah, come on up. There's a couple there.
Hi, thank you so much for allowing me to speak. My name is Priscilla. I am an international student from Holland College, and mine is just to share my experience of housing when I got here. So when I got accepted, I'm gonna try and be so quick, so bear with me. When I got accepted to Holland College, you are notified that there's a shortage of housing, there's a housing crisis, and you think to yourself, it is not that bad. And going on Facebook, you can see houses there, so I was like, not that bad. And it was in August, and I had to come in December. So from August to December, since I knew I was coming to Holland College, I had to narrow my search to just Prince Edward Island. And from August to December, I couldn't find anything for me and my son, because I was coming with a 3-year-old. So I kept on searching. I could only find a room on the day when I was at the airport, when a lady accepted to host me to her house, and she was like, you know what, since you're coming, just come and then you'll stay with me. I had to pay for her room. I paid $600 for 10 days. And when I got in, I was like, this is great. I don't care about the price as long as we have a roof, and then I'll keep on doing my search. So I got in and I kept on searching for affordable housing. And in Charlottetown, I couldn't find daycare, so I had to move where I can find daycare. And luckily, there was daycare here in Summerside. So I was again on the search of the housing, and the lady I was staying with noticed that I am in trouble. she noticed that I don't have housing, I don't have daycare for my son, and she really wanted to take advantage of that. So she told me, I'm gonna let you stay here, but you're gonna pay $1,500 per month for one room. So me and my son would pay $1,500. And I was like, that is definitely not affordable, so I have to get out of this place as soon as possible. And I started my search on Summerside. I couldn't still find anything because most international students, when you come in, you rent rooms in people's houses. And as a mom with a 3-year-old, I couldn't find anyone who was allowing me to go in with my 3-year-old. The options some were giving me was I rent 2 rooms, and that would be like me and my 3-year-old, but we have 2 rooms in the house. So long story short, I found myself into the shelter because the housing that was available was $1,500 per room or $1,000 and up, so that was really not affordable for me. And also, I wasn't finding anyone who was willing to accommodate the both of us. So from the shelter, I had to stay there for like 2 months. It really helped me because I had fast to settle in, like everything that was happening. I came in on December 15th, and there was like the Christmas holidays and all that. So I had to figure out quickly housing and my son's daycare before school resumes in January 8th. So everything was just going fast, and having the shelter really helped me to just calm down and fast go into school and then be able to look for housing. So after 2 months of being there, that's when they could find something for us. And yeah, I'm grateful to be here and just seeing that something is trying to be done for the housing crisis. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments. Abdel?
My name is Abdel Shaidat, 487 Water Street. Then regarding parking, what's the strategy for this project? Is like, according to the document, there is like one space for apartment. Is it for 1-bedroom apartment, 2-bedroom apartment, 3-bedroom apartment? Because until now we don't have such issue, such problem in the city, but with expanding, especially like vertically, we could face that, and we should, I think it's like very important to think about that now for the parking spot to be related like on the size of the apartment as well, not only for the commercial, but also for the apartments. Thank you.
Thank you. The only change or the only area where we're talking about parking differently from what you've already got would be in the CDA area where we aren't putting in a minimum. Having spoken to a number of developers over the past 2 years in task force and other work trying to understand what the limitations are on building housing, I would say most have been pretty direct with me in saying that no matter what you do, we're going to put the parking in. So I don't foresee builders not putting in parking and creating the problem. The challenge with tying it to the number of bedrooms, especially when I'd say the trend is to reducing parking requirements rather than being more prescriptive, is that you'll have folks who don't have a car, or so it gets really hard to try to predict the number of vehicles that a different unit would have. But I think the existing parking requirements will continue to be in place and should meet the need.
Any further comments from members of the gallery at this time? Yeah, we've got one more.
Hi, my name is Robin Smith, and I live at 264 Walker Avenue. I think I'm probably the one person that's going to be affected by this, probably the most. And I guess I was a little bit disappointed that I just got this notice now showing, if you look up on the screen here, our property is the last property on Walker Avenue, so it's kind of got, like it angles a little bit there. and there's just that little bit of space, so I'm assuming that's where the road is gonna be going through? Yeah. Is that where the road will be going through there?
The orange line is the route of the corridor.
Okay, so there's really not a lot of space there. So the corner of my property almost looks like it's hitting that road. So, first of all, that is a concern to me. I've got a family, I've got grandchildren. So, if something like that were to happen, first of all, it's gonna affect the value of my property. If, as said before, if the 10-story buildings are in, if you're looking at doing the 10-story buildings in that area there, that again, it's gonna affect the value of our properties. Like having a bunch of apartment buildings around. I mean, I've been in our dwelling for 15 years. And now I'm starting, and I wanted it to be a family home with my grandchildren and so on and so forth. But looking at this makes me wanna sell my house. And I don't wanna sell my house, but because I'm nervous with that road being so close to our property, and I guess I would need more clarification as to how much space is gonna be the corner of our property into that road. How much spaces are actually there? I wanna know that. And I wanna know, like, is there gonna be fencing around my property? Is the city gonna put in fencing to keep, because that is so close to my property, that what is gonna be done there? Because I'm not happy with that. I thought the road was gonna go down Walker a little bit and go on that little extension that goes out to Ryan Street. I thought that's initially how it was gonna go, but this is totally different than what I've expected. So, so for one, the 10-story, absolutely not. And then if someone could give me clarification as to the space of the road right there at the corner of my property. Because that's just, yeah. I mean, I did real estate for 18 years, and I know darn well that that is gonna be a deterrent to my property. Having the road that close to my property, plus having those large apartment buildings there is gonna, all of our properties, like, I mean, we all have nice homes. And so if the other question I had was, if we're doing this to here, is this gonna be done to areas like Gavin Estates? Like, are there fields around there gonna be zoned as like 10-story buildings? Like, this is, like, I mean, why should our subdivision be targeted even because we got this new connector, which is great, but I don't think it's gonna help our subdivision like Bluebell. I think it's gonna hurt. And I'm not sure if anyone can give me more clarification there on the road, at least, there.
So the road route has not been part of the project. It was already determined, so I would defer to the city on the plans for that. Heard your comments and the others about the height and you know, the adjacent uses, so we'll definitely be taking that back. Our task was to look at the east-west connector, so not necessarily other parts of the city to that question, but that's, it's tied to the city's initiative with the road and the secondary plan that's been there since 2008. But I'm not sure if the city can comment or comment separately or offline about your property.
I can answer, Gordon. I think that, and wasn't there, but I think the east-west corridor plan was adopted in 2008, so that would have shown where the road, would that have shown in 2008 that is where the road was to connect up through to Ryan or not?
I believe so. Aaron, you maybe, yeah.
Yeah, we bought the house in 2009. That was nowhere to be found. And we were not told of any road being put in right by our property, or I wouldn't have bought it.
Yeah, it sounds
Period.
Sounds like a real estate. It sounds like a real estate agent
I know,
ad.
I would not buy that
That's why you get a real
property.
estate agent, right?
So, I was a real estate agent then, so I know I wouldn't have bought the property if I knew there was gonna be a road built there.
Well, we can check and make sure and
I mean, it
confirm.
doesn't matter if that's what's gonna happen.
Yep.
Then we should have been approached, being that property. Okay, this is what we're planning on doing. This is where the road is gonna be. like, show us where it is, what's gonna actually be done to our property to protect it a bit, because it's gonna be right on the road. I
Yeah, I think
guess, so if someone can get back to me about it, perfect.
Sure, we can do that. Can we,
So
Director
just-
McDonald and
So to
CAO?
clarify, Robin, you thought it was going to be like 4 lots down that little stub?
Yeah,
Right,
that
okay.
little road that
I get you.
goes out to Ryan, and then it would connect to Ryan Street.
Okay.
That's how it was always told to us in the
And
subdivision,
I'm going to be honest, I thought that's where it was.
so.
So, and I
So I
don't know
guess
why
I, like,
thought
I
that.
was never told any different, and I mean, I know a lot of people, and I've, that know a lot about the city, and I was never told any different, that it was gonna be in my backyard, or I would have, I'm not,
Yeah.
That was the original, right from day one, I believe, that had come off of Ryan Street. I didn't know it was that close to your property either, so but I didn't draw the line, right?
yeah.
Was the original that it was coming off of Ryan and down, like
Yes.
by Robbins, or that it
Yeah.
was going 4 lots down?
It was supposed to go like from Maple Grove, or like, it was supposed to come down through, well, that's what my understanding
Yeah.
was. It was supposed to go through there onto Walker, which it would have been busy anyway, but still I would have much rather that than it be right in the corner of my property where our shed is. Our shed is basically on the corner of our property. So I'm like, what do we do here?
Okay, and maybe if we can figure out where it changed, because I am going to be honest, we nearly bought the 4th house beside that, and we did not buy it because we were
Mm-hmm. Because
told
you were-
that's where the
that's-
road was going.
Yeah.
So just if we can get some clarification
Yeah,
on that.
but it's just, I'd like to know what's gonna happen there, because it makes me, I mean, I didn't know, honestly, I did not know that until I got this paper, that it was gonna be that. So maybe I should have been paying more attention, but I don't think, like, you know, I don't think so. I mean, I'm usually up on things, but it's concerning. But anyway, if someone can get back to me and my husband and kind of clarify what's gonna take place to our property to protect it, and if there's gonna be sidewalks put in and things like this, like, when that's all said and done, because if there's gonna be that kind of traffic through there, there should be sidewalks, there should be, you know, things like that too, in our area, so. Anyway, thank you for
Yeah,
listening, and,
we'll certainly get back to you with a little more detail
Yeah.
on the road location, but I can certainly confirm tonight that as part of that east-west connector corridor, there's sidewalks and active transportation routes through the
Yeah.
whole thing.
perfect. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Councilor McColman?
Okay, I just want to thank Robin, but also the other folks that have spoken. I think we can look at the charts and the information and all of that, but I do think when we actually hear from people that live in those areas that can kind of pinpoint what is going to be the area that they're affected in, I think that really helps us as a council. So really appreciate people having the courage to come up to the mic. Thank you.
Any further comments, questions, statements from members of the public or members of council? Councilor McDougall?
Thank you, Your Worship. I really pleased to hear the comments here this evening, and this is our first meeting, and this is where we should hear them. I've heard some conversations out in the subdivisions in my area, and very disappointed. They had real concerns, but they're not here tonight. And so, you know, I don't know if the message is getting out there or not, but you know, this is our first meeting, and those concerns that were brought forward are you know, we really need to take a look at those. But my concern that has been brought to me is the, and I know the mayor won't be surprised when I say this, but the older subdivisions, like the last big building boom we had here was in the 70s and 80s, where all the subdivisions took place, right? And those subdivisions, they had lots of 75, 85 feet frontage, 150 feet deep, right? So to eliminate the R1 and where some of these, most of those were all strictly bungalows, right? And to have the 4-unit as of right in a lot of these areas, I know that some of the residents, or a lot of the residents, don't know what's happening. And I'm really concerned about that. You know, you can, the 4-unit, yes, you have to have the variances on the sides or whatever the setbacks are. But if you have a 45-foot frontage in the old town of Summerside, you're not going to have a very big building there. So that, I don't know if there's anything we can do about those issues or not. And something like that is not going to happen overnight, because all those houses are in great shape and everything like that. But if there's an empty lot there and we all of a sudden have a 4-unit as of right, and I have a concern with the way we, and I know we're not alone, other municipalities do it too, but you go and you approve a rezoning, and they wanted to get it go from R1 to R2. Well, they present you with the picture of this beautiful home, and then you end up with 2 old schoolhouses beside each other, right? Basically the look of it. And so I don't know how we fix that, but those are issues that we're doing a complete look at our official plan and everything. I think we need to take a real good look. Anyway, that's a concern that I have, and I'm, you know, I fully support this. I've been on this since it started. I've been on our FCM board, and we've been pushing this, and very pleased that the City of Summerside, I think we were the 7th one to be approved. And so I do support it. I just think we need to take a real good look at this, and if there's any of these issues that we can modify a bit, I hope we take a real good look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other statements, questions from Council? Councillor McColman?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think since Councillor McDougall, you have brought that up, I've talked to a few residents that have similar types of comments and questions. And basically what they have said is that you can't really change if there's a need for housing or apartments or, you know, those types of units. But I think the question that I've been asked by several residents is, it's almost like information overload. People are trying to picture what, you know, maybe like the people that are doing the presentation and the work on it really know what that's going to look like. But I've had questions asked about, so you mean somebody could have a certain zoning and people think it's going to be residential or row houses, but then it could turn out to be a 4 or 6 unit apartment building that they weren't expecting. And I think that's what they're a bit concerned about, because they don't really know maybe the material or the information as well as maybe somebody that's worked on it. So I think if we could really help people see that, and just as Councillor Bruce has pointed out, that helps us to be able to explain it better. Because people just think that an empty lot, all of a sudden it could be a 6 or 8 unit apartment building right next to a residential. And I think it's really concerning people.
Thank you. So without putting too fine a point of it, the 6 or 8 unit is still residential, right? We're trying to think about the need for different housing types. That being said, I don't think you're alone in those questions about being able to predict what it'll look like. And we do have future initiatives in the project that look at design guidelines and different standards. And we've spent time looking at different approaches across the country, and some are moving to very, very flexible, so 1 to 4 units, and they don't even specify the type. But what they do is they say it has to look like this, or it has to have, you know, there are ways to design it, for example, and that's not to say this is what it'll be ultimately, but where it has to look like a single, but you could have 4 units in it, right? So that work hasn't happened yet. The first bit of work was just to set up the framework to allow this in keeping with the agreement with CMHC, but But that's definitely one of the next big pushes, is to look at how it fits, what it looks like. So not necessarily the number of units, but how it feels and how it fits.
Any other further comments, questions, statements this time? As I mentioned at the outset, there are 4 more public information sessions at a minimum. I set the dates on those. The next planning board meeting, well, I said it now, I don't remember when it was. July 9th at 6 p.m. Here again, opportunity to, at this stage, staff and council go back and we'll potentially bring forward, have discussions and talk about some potential changes or adjustments and ways to help explain certain aspects of it and to continue the conversation. So I think it was really valuable. We certainly heard some comments that I think we didn't think about, and so now we get to go back and think about those, and that's how this process works, and this is how this process should work to get us to good result. Overall, I think I always think of this as we are basically creating more gentle density gently. And by doing it across the board, it means that everybody has to play a part and everybody has to give up something and everybody has to take something. But ultimately, it's really important for us to not jump to the worst case scenarios first. And I know I'm a habit of doing that all the time. But to look at the big picture, best case scenarios and the purpose of what we're doing this for, to make sure that we have attainable housing for all members of our community, so that young people in our community have a place to stay and a place to live, that older adults have the right type of housing for the right stage they are in life, and to make sure we have more inclusive and connected and healthy communities in the city. And really thank you all for the work that we've done, and thank everybody for the comments, and please continue to share those as the process unfolds. With that, I think we'll move into 2 resolutions from Councillor Duran, although Councillor Duran has to is going to read a couple of comments, and then we will, Justin, then you can move right into your resolutions.
Yeah, sure,
if that's
yeah,
okay?
yeah. And I guess just before I do that, was it Priscilla, was that your name that spoke earlier? Did I get that right? So I just wanted to thank you for sharing your experience and your story. I know when Mayor Dan first, I guess it was when we were all first elected, and you had asked, when the mayor had asked me to be a part of the housing task force, I was honored to do that. And you know, at the time I didn't know who specifically that being on that task force would go to help. But when you shared your story and your experience, that's the reason why I'm so glad that I was part of that task force. So you got guts by going up there and just going into details about how you experienced your first few months here. So it's very nice of that lady to charge you $600 for 10 days. It's very nice. I hope she's not listening and hope you're not still there. I mean, we're obviously not in the property management or development business, but if we can incentivize or make it easier for people like you to have access to the housing that you can afford, then I think we've done our job. So thanks again for rolling the dice on Summerside, and we're glad you're here and that things are hopefully working out. So yeah, that was very moving. Yeah, you got guts. So with that, I will read a couple of things that came in here. There's just 3 letters. First one is from Nate Williams. I would like to express my support for the HAF housing changes. As a young person living in Summerside, finding an affordable place to live is a big struggle, as it is for many Summersiders. These changes will make finding a place to live easier and create more dense, vibrant communities. Whether it be seniors looking to downsize, families looking for a larger home, or young people trying to get onto the housing ladder, implementing these policies will help Summerside be a better place to live and grow for everyone. Thanks, Nate. And then there are 2 letters from Ken Trenholm. One was sort of an afterthought to the first, so I'll start with the first one. Sent at 5:05 a.m., mind you. So serious thoughts early in the morning. I support the proposed changes for a number of reasons. I applaud the city for making housing a top priority in its plan. The mayor's task force on attainable housing forecasts a population increase to 20,100 by 2031. necessitating approximately 2,000 new dwelling units. Informed by this projection, adjustments in residential land allocations are imperative to accommodate the yearly need for 212 new units. The proposed east-west connector, EWC, zoning map alterations are timely and strategic in the context of the current housing crisis. Converting the PIDs adjacent to the EWC to CDA is a transformative move, enabling innovative developments adaptable to future needs and in alignment with official plan policies. The undeveloped nature of the land reduces the likelihood of NIMBY opposition at this time. I particularly endorse the proposal to permit additional units to be constructed on existing single-dwelling residential lots. With approximately 530 developed single-dwelling lots ranging from 620 to 800 square meters, adding 1 to 3 additional units per lot has the potential to significantly augment the city's housing stock by 500 to 1,500 units. These changes could foster socioeconomic diversity over time, a crucial consideration given the increasing divergence between households of different socioeconomic statuses. The establishment of blended communities housing diverse households can benefit all residents, promoting inclusion and a sense of belonging. Furthermore, I support the emphasis on pedestrian and active transportation-friendly designs for the EWC. I anticipate the city's implementation of an official active transportation plan and complete streets policy to accompany the complete streets strategy, as stipulated in the official plan, to substantiate this emphasis. While similar statements are already included in the city's official plan, clear policy direction is essential to direct staff and council on how to prioritize pedestrian and active transportation-friendly designs effectively. I'd be more than happy to assist with the official AT plan and or the complete street policy at any time. I greatly appreciate the public consultation on this issue prior to bringing it to council. Ken Trenholm. And then just as a final thought, he sent us another letter. If I compare the current zoning map with the proposed draft zoning map, I see that there is additional green space that is being created in 2 areas. And I know this isn't up on the screen, but we can have it scanned and digitized. And it was just sort of a embedded graphic in his email. So east of the Hall Family Trail, that was once R5, and west of A zone, to be turned R5. Yeah, I think it's just in the printed email, but anyway, it's just in reference to sort of just a random sort of lot that is kind of up in that area. I'm also recalling that a parking lot will be created at the junction of the trail and the EWC. This will increase safe passage to the trail for users who are not comfortable traveling on the streets and also provide an eastern access point similar to the parking located off McEwen Road. What I'm wondering is, there seems to be an area of R5 being zoned, and we don't have R5 anymore, but it's previous R5, that was once A zone, that seems to stand out as a sore thumb. See the area below. I used the city's online zoning map to measure approximately 7.4 acres in the red dotted line. So he did attach an excerpt from our zoning map, and we'll likely address that in one of the next meetings as to why that is and what the deal is there. So I'm wondering if there has been discussions on adding this additional 7.4 acres to Rotary, referring to the park. I certainly understand the need for more R5 zone development areas. I think he's referring to now what we call R4. However, perhaps now is the opportunity to set the zoning for future Rotary Park development. There's certainly no shortage of new ideas to introduce to Rotary Friendship Park. Pump track and frisbee golf are 2 of the most common, all of which will be in the background of the new EWC. All great news. Just passing along my thoughts. I'm excited about this new EWC development, and it is also the first street in the city's history to be designed with active transportation in mind. Ken Trenholm, president of Safe Summerside. Streets are for everyone. And that's all for the letters, but I meant to add to my just previous statements that I'm just the most well-behaved child that we've ever had in this room, and that includes my own, and thank you. Yeah. That's all I got until we get to the...
Thank you, Councillor. Any further comments, questions, statements, members of the public, members of council? Okay, hearing none, I'll pass it back to Councillor Duran. Councillor, you have 2 resolutions, I believe, to read.
Okay. Resolution COS 24-057, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDougall. Whereas the City of Summerside has been successful in receiving CMHC funding under the Housing Accelerator Fund program, and whereas the initiatives under the successful application involved a number of policy adjustments and planning updates, including in relation to the city's east-west connector growth node, legalizing 4 units on residential lots, increasing densification around post-secondary institutions, and reducing exclusionary zoning. And whereas the city has undertaken steps to meet initial milestones under the initiatives and begin the implementation of the recommendations of the Mayor's Task Force on Attainable Housing. And whereas the city has determined to repeal the City of Summerside Zoning Bylaw SS-15 and replace it with the City of Summerside Zoning Bylaw CS-40, be it resolved that the City of Summerside Zoning Bylaw CS-40 be hereby declared as read a first time. And Summerside Zoning Bylaw CS-40 is attached and available. I will not be reading that this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Duran. So, COS 24-057, moved by Councillor Duran, seconded by Councillor McDougall, is on the floor. Any further comments, questions, statements from members of council? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the resolution is carried unanimously. Councillor Duran?
And very short one, Resolution COS 24-058, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Cameron. Whereas City of Summerside Zoning Bylaw CS-40 was read a first time at this council meeting, be it resolved that the City of Summerside Zoning Bylaw CS-40 be hereby approved and declared as read a first time. Be it further resolved that City of Summerside Zoning Bylaw CS-40 be hereby referred to the Planning Board for review and recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor McDougall. COS, sorry, what was the number? I don't have the resolution in front of me. I was laughing, scrambling, but what was the number again?
COS 24-058, moved by myself and seconded by
COS
Councillor Cameron. But
COS
we
20
thank Bruce for all of his.
It's 058, yeah, okay, so that's right. COS 24-058, moved by Councillor Duran, seconded by Councillor Cameron, is on the floor. Any further comments, questions, statements from members of council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the resolution is carried. Those 2 resolutions are carried. That concludes our discussions this evening with respect to housing. We have one further resolution, and again, for members of the public, that is now the passing of first reading, so the next steps will be the open houses and the planning board, and we look forward to further conversations with all of you. At this point, we'll move into the amended part of our agenda here this evening, which is 5C. The resolution should be before members of council. Do you have it? I will read it. COS 24-059, moved by Councillor Duran, seconded by Councillor McDougall. Whereas Barb Gallant has been absent from 3 consecutive regularly scheduled meetings of council and pursuant to Section 99 Sub 4 of the Municipal Government Act is now disqualified from holding office for the remainder of the term. And whereas Barb Gallant has not resigned as required under Section 99 of the Municipal Government Act, be it resolved that, pursuant to Section 99 Sub 2A of the Municipal Government Act, Council declares the member's office vacant because the member has been disqualified under the Municipal Government Act from holding office as a member of Council. So Resolution COS 24-059, moved by Councillor Duran, seconded by Councillor McDougall, is on the floor. Are there any further comments, questions, statements from members of council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the resolution is carried. Thank you, council. Thank you, members of the public. It is going to be a long and busy weekend and week, but with that, we will adjourn our meeting, and I wish everyone I hope you all have a lovely rest of your week. Thank you.